Have you noticed how often the nation Israel appears in global headlines? Why does Israel remain so central? In Scripture, Israel is more than a geographic territory. It represents covenant. It represents divine promise. It represents the unfolding of redemptive history. From Abraham to David, from the prophets to the Messiah, Israel is interwoven into the biblical narrative. Prophet Zechariah in chapter 12 verse 3 describes Jerusalem as a burdensome stone for all peoples. History has repeatedly shown that Jerusalem becomes a focal point of global attention. And now, as tensions between Iran and Israel intensify, many are asking, is this just another geopolitical conflict? Or are we witnessing something the Bible spoke about long ago? In this video, we are not here to promote fear. We are not here to choose political sides. And so to answer the question, do ancient prophecies reveal patterns that help us understand modern events? Let us see what the Bible has to say. Let's examine what Scripture says. Jesus warned in Matthew chapter 24 verse 7, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." He did not say this would be unusual. He said it would be characteristic of a particular season in history. The origins of Israel begin with God's covenant with Abraham, son of Terah, a descendant of Shem, one of Noah's son, as recorded in the book of Genesis, the book of origin. God changed Abram's name to Abraham and promised that through his wife Sarah he would have a son, Isaac, and that through this son, a chosen nation would arise. Isaac later fathered Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. Jacob's 12 sons became the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. Over generations, these 12 tribes grew into a distinct group. And after slavery in Egypt for over 400 years, and the Exodus under Moses, they settled in the land of Canaan, the specific territory God had promised to give to Abraham and his descendants. From this lineage and covenant identity, the nation known historically and biblically as Israel emerged. The land promise was central to Israel's existence. God told Abraham that his descendants through Isaac would inherit Canaan as an everlasting possession. This promise passed to Isaac and then to Jacob. The tribes eventually formed a united kingdom under Kings Saul, David, and Solomon, and Jerusalem became the political and spiritual center of the nation. Even after periods of division, exile, and foreign domination, the identity of the people of Israel remained tied to Abraham's covenant through Isaac, the child of promise. And in modern times, the State of Israel was established in 1948 in parts of that same ancient land, reflecting a national identity rooted in this biblical lineage. Therefore, from the narrative beginning with Abraham, Hagar, and Ishmael, we see also a historical thread that leads first to the Arab peoples of the Arabian Peninsula, what we now know as modern-day Iran. While the biblical account focuses on covenantal promises and spiritual lessons, history shows how those ancient family lines intersected with political events, religious movements, and the formation of nations that continue to influence the world today. And so, we see that Iran's origins follow a different historical line. While Israel descends from Abraham through Isaac and Jacob, Iran traces its beginnings to the ancient civilization of Persia. The region historically known as Persia was home to Indo-Iranian peoples who migrated into the Iranian plateau thousands of years ago. These groups formed powerful empires, most notably the Achaemenid Empire under Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BC. Though not descended from Isaac's covenant line, Persia plays a role in the biblical narrative. After Babylon exiled the Jewish people, it was the Persian king Cyrus who allowed them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Ancient Persia gradually developed its own strong national identity, separate from Israel's covenant story. Over centuries, Persia became one of the world's great imperial powers, rivaling other empires of the ancient Near East. In 1935, the nation officially adopted the name Iran, meaning land of the Aryans, though its roots go back to ancient Persia. Unlike Israel, whose formation is directly tied to Abraham's covenant through Isaac, Iran's existence comes from the development of early Indo-Iranian tribes who settled, organized, and built enduring political structures in the region. Thus, using the Genesis account as a starting point, Israel emerged from the covenant line of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob, becoming a nation defined by promise and land inheritance. Iran, by contrast, arose from the ancient Persian peoples who established their own civilization in the Iranian plateau. Both nations intersect within biblical history, especially during the period of exile and restoration, but their origins differ. Israel through covenant lineage, and Iran through the rise of one of history's great ancient empires. And so, the Iran religion traces its cultural source to Hagar and Ishmael, just like the Jewish one traces its source back to Isaac and Abraham. The rivalry between these two continues today, as the Muslim world and Jewish nation are continually at odds and at war with each other. The headlines and the tension. The relationship between Iran and Israel has been marked by hostility for many decades. Military posturing, nuclear concerns, proxy conflicts, diplomatic threats, and regional instability. These are not minor disagreements as they involve alliances, global powers, and strategic positioning that affect the entire Middle East and the globe. When conflict centers around Israel, the world pays attention. But why does Israel consistently remain at the center of global tension? The answer is not only political, it is historical. And it may also be prophetic. Modern Iran was once ancient Persia. And in the Bible, Persia plays a significant role. In the book of Daniel, Persia rises as a world superpower after Babylon. Daniel, chapter 8 describes a ram with two horns, widely understood to represent the Medo-Persian Empire. And so, Persia was once used by God to free the nation of Israel from Babylonian captivity. Cyrus the Great even allowed the Jewish people to rebuild Jerusalem on their return from exile. So, historically, Persia and Israel were not always enemies. But biblical prophecy shows that relationships between nations shift over decades. The Book of Daniel. Chapter 2 reveals that kingdoms rise and fall according to God's sovereign design. The Most High rules in the kingdom of men. Daniel chapter 4:17. And so, no empire is permanent, and no alliance is fixed forever, as history moves under divine oversight. Jesus' prophecy in Matthew chapter 24 becomes crucial here. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. Notice what he says. See that you are not troubled. Wars themselves are not proof that the end has arrived, but they are part of a pattern. Therefore, when tensions intensify across multiple regions, not isolated but interconnected, Scripture tells us to observe carefully. Luke chapter 21. Verses 25 speaks of distress of nations with perplexity. Perplexity means confusion, uncertainty, leaders unsure of outcomes, and citizens anxious about the future. This description feels strikingly familiar to our global climate. Now we move to Revelation. The book of Revelation does not name modern countries. It mostly uses symbols. For example, beasts represent kingdoms, horns represent rulers or power, waters represent peoples and nations. The book of Revelation 17:15 explains clearly, the waters are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. When Revelation speaks of turmoil among waters, it speaks of global unrest. It describes a world system often opposed to God's purposes. It describes power struggles. It describes shifting alliances. It describes a spiritual dimension behind political conflict. This does not mean every specific war fulfills a single prophecy, but it means recurring patterns of global instability are part of the prophetic framework. The Bible consistently teaches that physical conflicts often reflect deeper spiritual realities. This is why Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 6:12, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood." This does not excuse violence. It does not demonize nations. It reminds us that human conflict is often driven by pride, power, fear, and rebellion. Throughout Scripture, when nations exalt themselves above justice and humility, instability follows. The book of Proverbs 14:34 says, "Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people." The tension we see globally reflects not just political disagreement, but also moral and spiritual struggle. Iran and Israel may dominate headlines, But the deeper question is this: are we spiritually prepared for the times we are living in? Ancient prophecies remind us that history is not random. Conflicts are not outside God's awareness. Nations will rise, nations will fall. But Revelation ends not with chaos. It ends with a throne. It ends with restoration. It ends with hope. So watch wisely, pray faithfully. And remember, the God who guided ancient empires still governs today. If this teaching helps you see Scripture more clearly, let us know in the comments. And if you want more prophecy explained in a balanced and biblical way, subscribe to Symbols and Prophecy Explained TV. Stay watchful, stay discerning, stay faithful.